Well, good evening and welcome to Dome at Home, the Manitoba Museum Planetarium's weekly astronomy show, Thursday nights at 7. I'm your host, Scott Young, the Planetarium Astronomer, running solo again this week. Mike is on holidays. Thanks for joining us. I'm seeing lots of people checking in the chat. We're live on Facebook Live and through the Manitoba Museum's YouTube channel. And I will be doing my best to monitor those chats during the course of the program. So if you have a shout out or you want to tell us where you're from, how people are watching, or if you have a question, drop something in the chat there. Of course, the chat is a family zone, so please keep that in mind. And yeah, we'll get right into our show. It's great to be back this week. It's kind of a busy week the last little while, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting some clear skies in the next little while. Actually, I know it's probably going to cloud over this evening because a friend of mine just got her very first telescope delivered by courier today, and it's all put together. And of course, that means it has to be cloudy. So sorry about that. It's kind of the way it goes. But we do have some nice clear weather coming up, and it is a great time to be looking at the sky. So let's get right into it here. The sky. Still sunsetting a little later than I would like, but it is kind of the way it goes at this time of the year. It doesn't get dark till quite late, but eventually the sun will go down. We'll get some great views as the sun goes down. We'll just get a little bit of sunset going on here. There we go. Now, you won't have to wait for it to get dark to notice the moon. If the forest fire haze gets out of the sky and you can actually see the blue sky, we're at almost first quarter moon, and the moon is already in the sky before the sun goes down. It's following the sun by about a quarter of the sky right now. So when the sun is due south at noon, the first quarter moon is just rising over there in the east. And then as the sky sort of pivots around, as the earth rotates, the sun sets. That puts the first quarter moon high up in the south or in the southwest. And I've watched it the last few nights. Actually, it was a great view with the fire smoke. Actually, it made the moon nice and orange color. But we're almost at a first quarter moon, so we've got pretty much a half illuminated moon. The moon has gone through the first quarter of its orbit around the Earth. That's where the name comes from, even though it looks like it's half lit up. Definitely worth checking out with binoculars. This is a great time of the lunar phase to observe the moon. You've got all sorts of craters right along what we call the terminator here. The line between light and dark is called the terminator. The big gray areas, the maria or seas, are nicely visible over here. There's some nice highlands down in the southern part of the moon, and right along here, there's all sorts of really nice big craters. In fact, right now, tonight, we got a nice big crater right on the rim there. And because basically, if you were standing there, the sun would just be rising. And you know, at sunrise, you get those long shadows. Those long shadows make it really easy to see small details. So that's a great thing to look for on the moon. Let's see. Well, I'm seeing so many new names pop by in the chat here. I just want to check out a few things. Good to see. Oh, Maria's here from Thompson with her group, and Hollis from Connecticut. Awesome. Nice to see you. And oh my goodness. Oh, Highlander, good to see you as well. Oh, and Jenny and oh, great. Lots of folks here. Oh, Ulrika points out, hello, looking forward to the peace of the skies after a hectic day. That's the best thing about astronomy. It really can take you from a hectic day to a nice, relaxing Zen kind of thing. I mean, I have had a pretty rough week or so, but it has, you know, at the end of it, you can at least escape it for a little bit and check out the sky. Let's see, who else do we have? Oh, Michelle is here. Hi, nice to see you. Michelle is one of the local astronomers here and has been doing some amazing imaging of the sun recently, kind of learning some tricks from her. So that's pretty cool. Chalmers is here and is 10. Excellent. And Chalmers's question is, why do you call it the Terminator? Well, it's not just me that calls it the Terminator, of course. That's the official name. it predates any of the Terminator movies that you might have seen where it's like, robots traveling through time and stuff like that. Um, it's the ending point of the lit part of the moon, I guess. So the Terminator is like the ending. And so I guess that's where the name comes from, but it does sound a little more sci-fi than what it actually means. All right. We do want to take a look at a bunch of things. Our theme tonight is Pluto. Pluto is actually at its best right around now for this year. Its best is not very good. You will not be able to go outside in the sky and find Pluto. Not even if you have a pretty good sized telescope, unless you know exactly where to look and your expectations are really, really low. We'll get into Pluto in a second. But still, right after the sun has set, we have, let me do this just a slightly another way here. We do have those other planets that have been visible in the evening sky. So if we go to about, let's go to, oh, yeah, there we go. We'll just let the sun go just far enough below the horizon, just far enough after sunset so that the sky starts to darken. And the first star you see at night will be the planet Venus. It becomes visible low in the west. Over the last week or so, it's actually been passing the planet Mars. Mars is way off in the distance, really faint. I never saw it. Even with binoculars, I never managed to spot Mars. The sky was just too bright compared to the faintness of Mars. But I did see Venus, and I did see the moon a few nights ago. The moon was passing right through that area. So that was a nice view earlier in the week. Venus still quite low in the sky. It sets very soon after the sun. So if you're outside after 10:30, you're probably not going to see Venus. It will have already set. And if you have a lot of trees or neighbors' houses or things like that, this is very close to the horizon. So it's I got to say, it's pretty tough to see Venus. I have to walk to exactly the right spot down the street where there's a gap between two neighbors' yards and there's a low point in the tree. And when I get to that right spot, then I can see Venus. But the rest of the time, it's just behind the horizon of the city. So you kind of got to do a little bit of walking for it. If you have a sky that's clear in that direction, or if you're out in a rural area, it jumps right out at you. It's super bright, super easy to find. But for us city-bound folks, it's a little bit tougher. As it gets darker, Venus fades away, disappears down below the horizon, but all the other constellations start coming out. And we've been looking at these every week. And the springtime constellations are pretty much setting very soon after the sun does. Oh, there went a satellite going by as I sort of fast forward here. We are in a great time for looking at satellites. The space station comes over in the morning. We'll be talking about that. Lots of other satellites that are up there that we can see. They look like moving stars cruising across the sky. By about 11:30, 12 o'clock, it's finally actually kind of dark, and you can start to see the many, many beautiful constellations. We're not going to spend a lot of time on constellations this particular week. We covered them last week, and we'll cover them again in detail next week. But we do have sort of a bunch of space news and cool space stuff that came up over the last week, so I want to get to that. I will point out, though, that around midnight, way off in the southeast, Saturn starts to rise. And then a little bit later, Jupiter, even brighter, rises over in the southeast. Again, they stay pretty low, but they do get high enough that you should be able to see them. And they just get higher and higher as the night goes on. So if you're up late, or if you get up before the sunrise, you'll get a good view of Jupiter and Saturn. We'll be featuring them throughout the summer as they get into their sort of closest points with the Earth. Now, over in this area of the sky as well is another planet, or is it? Hard to say. Another object in our solar system that gets an inordinate amount of attention based on its size. Like if you were thinking, based on size, where all the attention or the science or the research should go, that the sun should get most of it, and then of all the planets, Jupiter should get the most because it's the biggest, and so on. Pluto, people shouldn't even pay attention to at all. But of course, Pluto has this sort of underdog kind of feel to it. And of course, the Disney character doesn't hurt as well. You got a cute dog named after with the same name as the planet. So it definitely is something that everybody seems to have an opinion on. So we're going to talk a little bit about Pluto. Before that, I just have a couple of quick announcements. So let's flip over to here. This is probably one of my best announcements in the last little while. The planetarium is opening. The museum galleries at the Manitoba Museum and the planetarium will open August the 5th and will be open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday throughout the summer, unless, of course, the health restrictions change. We can't do things before then because we've been closed for quite a while. There's quite a bit of stuff to do. We need more than just a couple of days notice to sort of make that work. But we're really looking forward to welcoming you under the dome so you can see the sky surrounding you, and we can do full constellation programs and stuff like that. All the schedule will be going up onto our website in the next day or so, but we'll be running a couple or 3 shows a day, I think is the current plan. So watch for that. Definitely come and see us. We of course, ticket sales are a big part of how the planetarium and the museum stay open. So we'd love to see you down visiting us over the summer. Okay, actually, I guess I should play this first.
Cool space stuff.
Mike, I miss your voice. There we go. We had a big deal over the last week or so. The billionaire space race is heating up. Virgin Galactic launched their head guy, Richard Branson, and a crew of 4 passengers and 2 pilots into almost space. The Virgin Galactic spaceship is basically a pair of airplanes, and one airplane goes up and then drops the other airplane, which fires a rocket engine and goes up, goes towards the edge of space, turns around, and then basically turns around and sort of glides down. And so you get about 5 minutes of floating around in weightlessness. It's kind of like the very early flights that were done back in the 60s in terms of the astronauts. They couldn't quite get enough speed to go up into space and stay there in orbit, but they could get up to the edge of space and back. Now there's some debate. The official definition of where space is 100 kilometers above the surface. It's called the Kármán line. The Virgin Galactic space mission went up to about 88 kilometers. So they didn't some people say they didn't technically get it into space. I mean, they got everything that they needed. I mean, it's somewhat of an arbitrary line there, to be honest, but they got to see the curvature of the Earth. They got to float in microgravity, and you can too for only $250,000 US a ticket. And while you think that might be expensive, I know people personally that have they're in line. They're ready to go. So I'm pretty excited to, it was one thing to watch people you don't know do this thing, but to see someone that is, a friend of yours actually go up there, I think that'd be amazing. So the reason this is a race is that Virgin Galactic went up last week. The other billionaire-led space program, Blue Origin, led by the Amazon founder, Jeff Bezos, they're going up on July 20th. Now this looks more like a space mission to me. It's a rocket with a capsule on top, and you get inside it and they shoot you up and you go up above the Kármán line, up above 100 kilometers distance. So you are for sure in space, there's no argument. And then you come down, you parachute down. It's very much like the old Apollo missions. In fact, this is almost exactly what Alan Shepard, the first American in space, went through. It's the same kind of flight, basically. I don't know what Blue Origin tickets cost, but I do know that they're going to be doing commercial flights as well. So anyway, that's coming up next week. It'll be cool to watch for sure. There's a lot of people that are saying, oh, why are billionaires going into space? Why are they not doing more sustainable things here? I mean, there's arguments to be made there for sure. But this is kind of this is how technology goes from something that only a government can do to something that becomes available to the population. Now, right now, we're in that transition time where companies are starting to do it, but it's so rare, it's so in demand that they can charge, $250,000 a ticket or whatever. But 20 years from now, those tickets are going to be much lower, just like airplane tickets were, pretty, if you wanted to fly across the Atlantic Ocean just after Lindbergh's flight back in the 20s or whatever, it would have cost a lot of money. now you can buy tickets like that relatively inexpensively. Now, still not available to just anyone necessarily. There's still a cost factor, obviously. So it's not as accessible as it could be. But one of the cool things is that on this first Blue Origin flight, the fourth person that's going up with them has finally been announced, and it's an 18-year-old kid, the youngest person ever to fly in space. He's they auctioned off the seat, and then the person that won the auction decided they couldn't go. The scheduling didn't work for them, so they couldn't go. So instead, this 18-year-old kid is going. So I think that'll be cool. I talk to kids all the time, and they always say, when are they going to send kids into space? Well, technically an 18-year-old is an adult, but only barely. So this is, I think, really a positive move for all of you kids out there that want to go into space. By the time you're my age, you'll be able to buy a ticket to go into space, for sure. There's my prediction. And of course, you know, it's one that if it turns out not to be true, you can track me down and complain to me if you want. All right. What else do we have? Oh, yes. Back to the sort of mainstream space program. The International Space Station will be getting a brand new space module. It's called the Nauka space module. Nauka means science in Russian. And this Russian module will go up. It's basically one of the bigger pieces of the space station, and it will give a bunch of new capabilities. There's a European robotic arm up there. This launches on July 21st, and it's going to replace one of the older pieces, the Pirs docking module. So there'll be a bunch of juggling around at the space station, and pieces coming off and pieces going on, and all sorts of spacecraft nearby, which is cool because this will all be happening while the space station is making passes over Manitoba, over North America. So check our website, manitobamuseum.ca, go to the planetarium section. There's always a link there that shows you how to find where the space station is. And so if you go out and look at the space station, you may actually see, instead of one dot, you might see 2 dots or 3 dots moving across the sky, depending on how these construction operations are proceeding. So that's kind of cool. We haven't had a chance to see that kind of thing for quite a while. So it's nice to see a big piece of the space station being added on. Okay. Let me just check the chat here to see what we got. Oh, we've got some folks on YouTube commenting. Welcome. Hey, Anthony, from Philadelphia. Fantastic. You'll have to drop me a line and let me know how you heard about us. I've spent a little bit of time in Philly, but certainly not enough to promote the show. So folks in Toronto as well. And oh, Ryan on YouTube is asking, are we going to cover the James Webb Telescope? Yes, we will. The James Webb Telescope is pretty exciting. And its launch will definitely be a feature of the show. So yeah, okay, great. Let's just see what else we got. Oh, on Facebook, Jenny points out, yeah, the Nauka module is also bringing the second toilet to the International Space Station. The crew is 7 people, and during crew changes, when they're switching out, it goes up to 10, 1 bathroom. So imagine being basically in a motorhome with 10 people and only 1 toilet. So this is going to be a very popular module, I can tell you. Okay, let's see. Yeah, lots of feelings about the whole billionaire space thing. There we go. Okay, I do have to repeat here. Todd has a joke here that he posted. How does the moon get his hair cut? Eclipse it. I think it works better if you say it out. He clips it. Out loud it works. Written, maybe not so much, right? But there we go. I'll put that into my dad joke pile, because I'm always stuck for jokes that are you know, family friendly. Okay, Pluto. I want to introduce you to someone that I never had the chance to meet, but always wanted to. This is Clyde Tombaugh. When Clyde was basically just a student, he got a job at Lowell Observatory in Arizona, using the 13-inch telescope, which is not much bigger than the telescope I have in my backyard. It's not big, massive stuff. It's, you know, it's a nice telescope, but and his job was to take pictures of the sky over and over and over again, looking for planet X. What kind of a cool job is that, right? Looking for planet X. They knew that out there past Neptune, there should be another planet. And they thought they knew that because the measurements of where Neptune and Uranus and Jupiter and Saturn were seemed to be off slightly. And the only way that could happen is if there was another planet out there that was pulling on them with its gravity, and we weren't accounting for that because we hadn't discovered it yet. So the thought was there must be a planet out there. And so various scientists calculated where there should be planet X. And Clyde Tombaugh did a survey where basically he just took pictures of the sky, the whole chunk of the sky, one after another. And then a few days later went back and took different pictures of the same areas. And then he compared them to see if anything had moved. And he discovered piles of stuff. I mean, he was discovering so many things, he didn't even bother keeping track of them after a while, because his job was to find a very specific thing, not to find asteroids, not to find comets, not to find variable stars that got brighter or dimmer. His job was to find planet X. So here's one of the pictures he took January 23rd, 1930. And here's the picture he took 6 days later. Do you see Pluto? It's the one that moved. Here, we'll go back. You see it? The way you actually do this is you sit at a sort of a little microscope, and it flashes the two pictures back and forth really quickly like this. And you notice that some things look like they're flashing on and off. One night there was a little bit of cloud, so the stars are a little bit dimmer and stuff like that. But there is actually one star that is only visible in one spot in one image, and then in the other spot in the other. I'll give you a trick there. There's Pluto. And then 6 days later, it's moved to over there. Look at the patience and the meticulousness that you'd have to look for a planet back in the day like that. I mean, imagine staring into a microscope, basically seeing this over and over again for like every cloudy night, and then every clear night being up until dawn taking these pictures. It was a huge effort. And they discovered Pluto. And when they discovered Pluto, it was on February 18th, 1930. And there was big fanfare because they were looking for planet X, and they found something out at the distance past Neptune. So they said, well, this must be planet X. This is the planet Pluto. And they calculated the orbit, and it was out past Neptune, at least most of the time. Once they started observing it, they realized that Pluto's orbit was not like the other planets. It was oval shaped, it was tilted compared to the other ones. It was sort of squished off to the side so that sometimes Pluto would actually be closer than Neptune to the sun. It was a very unusual object, but it was planet X, right? Now it turns out that all of those inaccuracies with the other planets turned out to mostly be errors in observation, and they didn't actually exist. So the reason for looking for planet X kind of was, well, it wasn't fully a mistake, but it wasn't as strong a case as they thought at the time. And they realized that Pluto was really tiny. Even if those errors were there, Pluto's size was not big enough to make the gravity that would pull these planets off course. So Pluto was not planet X. But okay, it's planet number 9, and maybe there's still planet X out there. Maybe. Well, we've learned quite a bit since 1930. Clyde Tombaugh, of course, his career was made at that point. I mean, one of 3 people in the world to discover a major planet of the solar system. 1978, here's the best picture of Pluto that we had. This is 2 pictures on different nights. And you notice that on the left one, there's kind of a bump on the top. It turns out that Pluto has a moon called Charon that was discovered in 1978. But like, look at the detail of this picture. There's like, it's just a dot. It's almost just like noise or like the pixels kind of thing. I mean, they weren't pixels back then. This was done on film at the time. But we really didn't know a lot about Pluto at this point. But we were starting to find out things about Pluto's sort of surroundings. In 1994, the Hubble Space Telescope took its, at that point, the best picture of Pluto and Charon. Still, I mean, we're not seeing a lot of detail there. We can't see what the worlds are like at all. Basically, you can see that one's bigger than the other, and they're kind of that far apart. That's really all the detail we had. In 2000, we were able to get that same level of image from the ground, which meant that you could do it more often. and they were able to sort of figure out how Charon went around Pluto and so on. When I was a kid, we'll generously say when I was a kid, I dreamed to get a picture of Pluto that would show some detail. And in 2010, the Hubble Space Telescope gave us this picture. This is still a terrible picture. I mean, you can hardly tell anything, but it was the best that we have up till that point. And the reason, well, there's two reasons. One, Pluto's small, and two, Pluto is far away, way far away. It's kind of surprising that we even discovered it when we did, as early as 1930, because most of the objects that are as faint as Pluto weren't getting discovered until like the 70s and 80s, when they were starting to do that kind of meticulous survey using photography and using larger telescopes and things like that. To have discovered it as early as 1930 was the best luck ever. It just happened to be in the exact spot where this mistaken calculation for planet X said something was going to be. It was literally just a fluke that we found it in 1930, which is where the whole thing starts. Pluto was a planet because that's what they were looking for in 1930. Fast forward to 2010. Pluto is this really small thing past Neptune, but it's not like the other planets. It's in a weird orbit. It's small. It's not by itself. When we start to look out there, there's a whole bunch of stuff out past Neptune, not just Pluto. Now we know that there are millions of tiny little Plutinos or little tiny Plutos swarming around in a belt of material called the Kuiper belt. That was theorized as early as 1950 by Gerard Kuiper, who it's now named after. Everybody thought he was a nut because, well, we'd see all of that stuff. Well, now we do see all that stuff with modern technology. There are thousands of objects out there past Neptune. Pluto is just one of them. It's just that we discovered it 70 years before we discovered any of the other ones. So it sort of didn't make sense at the time because it was all by itself. Now we know exactly what Pluto is. Pluto is a large and interesting world in the Kuiper belt. And if we discovered Pluto today, we would absolutely not call it a planet. We would have, even if we discovered it, 10 years ago, we wouldn't call it a planet. This is when the cool stuff really happened, though. In 2015, the New Horizons spacecraft was going to fly past Pluto. We wanted to see Pluto up close. Whether you'd call it a planet or not, it's a really interesting world. It's got a moon. It's had an atmosphere. There's all sorts of things. I see some questions popping up here. I'll get to those in just a second. The problem with Pluto, one of the problems with Pluto, it's so far away that to do a conventional space mission would take 30 years to get there. And there's no scientist that wants to wait 30 years for pictures to come back. So we went on a fast mission. We built basically the fastest spacecraft we ever built, the biggest rocket, pushing this thing as fast as it could. The problem is when it gets to Pluto, there's no brakes. You can't put a giant rocket on this thing to slow it down again, because then it would be too heavy to get going in the first place. So basically this is what's going to be a flyby mission. You go zooming by, you don't stop, don't blink or you'll miss it. That's basically the New Horizons mission. The flyby was greatly anticipated, and it was July the 14th, 2015. So not that long ago, right in the middle of summer. I remember it well. The launch was in 2006, so it was a 9-year trip. That was a record speed. Only 9 years to get out to the Pluto area. It wasn't until a week before the flyby, almost 9 years later, that the New Horizons spacecraft started getting better pictures than what we had from here on Earth. I mean, that's how small Pluto is. You have to be right up in its face before you can see any details. This is a week before flyby. And when we saw this, we knew that things were going to be awesome because you can start to see some details. Pluto, the big one in the middle there, kind of a bright spot with some dark stuff on the bottom. Charon over here, much darker, looks like a a dark spot on the top. There's something cool going on. Okay, so we're excited about this. While the spacecraft was in flight, some new moons of Pluto were discovered. They discovered a couple more before then, but there were 5 moons, not just one. And so they were going to zoom past, and they were going to take as many pictures as they could of as many things as they could. They couldn't cover everything. So this is the famous picture of Pluto now. This is the view of Pluto from the flyby date. It's an amazing picture. Nobody expected it to look like this. There's these flat areas, there's these mountainous areas, there's craters, of course. Everything has craters, so you expect to see some of those. In fact, Pluto should be covered with craters. I mean, there should be craters everywhere. What's erasing the craters? There shouldn't be. I mean, the Earth has oceans and volcanoes and glaciers and erosion and rain and wind and stuff like that could erase the craters that happen here. But most other places, a crater gets made, it's there forever. Pluto is a geologically alive planet. That was totally unexpected. It's way too small for that. We still don't fully understand it. You got terrain like this. These are essentially sand dunes, but not made out of sand. They're made out of snow, and the snow is probably frozen oxygen. It's so cold there that oxygen, the air that we breathe, freezes into frost and then blows around in the winds on the atmosphere of Pluto and is shaped into these dunes. It's boggling. Here's Charon, the moon. Again, not as many craters as we expect. There's this whole half of the moon that looks like it's completely different than this half. There's this dark spot over here. Nobody knows what's going on there. And then the other moons, we happen to get close to one of them, but some of the other ones we only saw off in the distance. So we didn't get a good survey of the moons, really, but you can see they're very oblong and irregular kinds of things. Okay, let's see here. This is my favorite picture of the flyby. This is as it's going past, and we're looking at the terminator, but on Pluto, the edge between daytime and nighttime. And you can see these are basically big icebergs that are frozen in the land of Pluto. And then you've got these areas that are almost like frozen oceans. There is water on Pluto. It's all frozen because it's so cold out there, but there is water there. That's kind of amazing. And it's just such a rugged terrain. We wouldn't expect this kind of thing on such a small world. And then you can see these beautiful layers of the atmosphere, a very complicated atmosphere. You don't expect that on a really small planet. The small planets have very little gravity. Often the atmosphere will just escape into space or things like that. So many, many mysteries. So even if Pluto wasn't officially considered a planet, it's still an amazingly complicated and wonderful world ripe for exploration. We flew past it, looked back, and here we have the atmosphere of Pluto sort of backlit by the sun. This is basically Pluto passing in front of the sun from the spacecraft, and the air of Pluto is illuminated there. So we know a lot more about Pluto than we do about most of the other objects out there in the Kuiper Belt, because Pluto was once thought of as a planet. It's probably good that Pluto was discovered as early as it was, and that it was called a planet for a while, because we probably wouldn't have sent a spacecraft this big and complicated and powerful just to look at an asteroid or a Kuiper Belt object or things like that. So its names really matter, it seems. But it's kind of, we now understand the place of Pluto in our solar system. And so for right or wrong, they've chosen to call Pluto a dwarf planet. I actually think of it as an ice dwarf. There are a bunch of ice dwarf planets out past Neptune. And there's also a dwarf planet in our asteroid belt, but it's not made of ice. So I can't kind of use, I think just dwarf planet isn't quite descriptive enough. We need to get a little more fine when we start looking at what we call planets. New Horizons was out there in the Kuiper Belt, and I mean, there's a lot of empty space out there, but it just took a little tweak to send it off towards another object that hadn't even been discovered when the spacecraft was launched. They didn't even know about it. It was discovered and then happened to be just in the right spot that they could get to it. And it was called Arkaroth. And it basically is two things kind of stuck together. Really, really strange world. And we just happen to fly past this. They're hoping to actually get New Horizons to target another object out there as well. And here's just a comparison of, there's Pluto and its family of, here it's only showing 3 moons, but there are 5 of them. Here's Earth. So Earth is much, much bigger. And these are some of the other objects that are out there in the Kuiper Belt. Eris here is actually slightly bigger than Pluto. So Eris is actually the biggest of the Kuiper Belt. We used to think, well, at least Pluto is the biggest thing out there in the Kuiper Belt, even if it's not a planet. No, not so much. And there might be other objects out there. So Pluto is firmly in the dwarf planet category, along with Eris and Makemake and Haumea and Ceres, the asteroid in the asteroid belt. There's probably other ones out there too that we just haven't discovered. Okay, I wanted to see a couple of these questions. Somebody is singing Ice, Ice Planets. I assume that's a Vanilla Ice reference there. And Ice Dwarf sounds D&D-ish. Yes, I did a talk that I called Pluto versus the Ice Dwarfs back during the big debate about whether it was a planet or not. And I was using some, I think it was some Lord of the Rings imagery of dwarfs and things like that. It's definitely like that. Let's see. Oh, Arkaroth is Michelle's favorite object. Wow, I hadn't heard the name until just recently myself. Let's see. We got some night sky question that I'll get to that. Oh, some great questions and answers there about Pluto and why it's not considered a planet. As Tiffany pointed out on Facebook, one of the criteria for being a planet is that it's the big thing out there and there's not a whole bunch of other things around it. Like, for example, Earth goes around the sun, and in that area, there's a few asteroids and a few small things, but they're way, 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 way smaller. There's nothing almost the same size as Earth in our orbital space. If there was, Earth wouldn't technically be called a planet at that point either. But I mean, that isn't the case. It's only the case for Pluto because there's literally hundreds of these things out there. And the way I like to think of it, imagine if you had to memorize the names of the planets. You're in school and you have to memorize all the way out to Pluto if Pluto was a planet. But then halfway through your school year, they find Makemake and you have to add that in. And then you have to add in Haumea, you have to add in Eris. And then, what order are they in? Sometimes Pluto's closer than Makemake, sometimes Makemake is close. It would get really confusing as a grade 6 kid to have to memorize the solar system if we included all of the dwarf planets out there in the Kuiper Belt. So really, it's to save the kids that we're cutting things off. We talk about the rocky planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. We talk about the gas giant planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And that's as much as you have to memorize. The dwarf planets are there. They're important. You just don't have to memorize all the names, because if you include Pluto, you got to include a whole bunch more. So that's why it is. Science sometimes realizes, maybe we put something in the wrong box. The things weren't as simple as we thought they were. And so instead of just planets, now we use kinds of planets, dwarf planets, rocky planets, gas planets, and so on. Okay, I did have another question here that I wanted to try and catch. I know it's Boris is asking, hey Boris, good to see you. How long does it take for the photos to get back to Earth? I think the Pluto ones took about 4.5 hours to be beamed back pixel by pixel from the flyby. And actually, they couldn't do it during the flyby. Everything was basically just taking all the pictures. So we didn't even know that the whole thing had worked until about 6 hours after the flyby when we got the first picture back. And it was one of those moments where you see all the people in mission control jumping up and down and hugging each other because, I mean, imagine if the lens cap was on, or some equivalent to thing like that where your photo shoot just falls apart. There's no second chance with a flyby mission like that. So everything had to work perfectly, and luckily everything did. Ulrike was saying, why couldn't New Horizon get into orbit around Pluto? Well, the problem is it's going at such a huge speed that it's already traveling faster than the escape velocity for Pluto. So if if it went close to Pluto, Pluto's gravity isn't strong enough to grab it and hold it in orbit. It would have to slow down using a rocket or something like that. It doesn't have a rocket on it. If we put a rocket on it that would help it slow down, it would be too heavy and it would take longer to get there. And so the scientists basically said, let's do a quick flyby and get at least some information in 9 years rather than waiting 30 years for the amount of time it takes to get an orbiter mission to get there and so on. Because over 30 years, there's so much possibility for things to go wrong, computers in space being bombarded by radiation, just failures, the chance of a random meteorite hitting you and things like that. Plus the principal investigator, Alan Stern, is a pretty impatient guy. He's like, I want pictures now. So that kind of drove the mission philosophy. We might go back to Pluto. We might go to another Kuiper Belt object, maybe to stay, but I think there's a lot of more targets closer to home that are going to be targeted first. Okay, there was a question here. Hi, Ben. Ben is 6 and got a telescope for his birthday. He's watching us on YouTube and can't wait to go back to the museum and planetarium. Well, come and drop me a line and we'll see if we can say hi when you come to see us. That'd be great. Congratulations on the telescope. Happy birthday. Let's see. Sorry, Ben was asking about an invisible Earth mass near the Kuiper Belt. So there's a whole bunch of ideas about the edge of the solar system and what else is out there. I mean, people have been looking for Planet X since before 1930, and they're still looking now. I mean, there is a very slight possibility that there's a very, very distant, larger planet that we just haven't detected. Maybe it's in a very strange orbit that is tilted so much that we just haven't looked in that part of space yet. I mean, space is big. It's pretty easy to hide things. But we're pretty sure that there isn't a very large, a very large planetary-sized mass out there anywhere nearby. Now, there might be clumps of material in the Kuiper Belt or things like that. There's definitely not a black hole that close to us. Black holes are formed by the sun, and black holes are formed by a star that dies, and there aren't any that are that close to the sun, basically. So I think that there's a lot of sort of ideas of what are out there, but the amount of research that we have at this point, I'm thinking we're not going to find anything the size of the Earth or larger out there in the solar system. Smaller stuff, maybe, and I'm prepared to be surprised, but there certainly isn't any evidence at this point. So we'll have to see what that looks like. Let's see. Ryan asks on YouTube, no pressure to answer, but my 5-year-old heard your comment about you can buy a ticket to space by the time you're my age and wanted to know how old I am. Yeah, okay. Well, I just rolled the big 5-0 earlier this year. So I am ancient, as my kids like to say. But actually, I think it'll be like probably 20 years maybe that the cost of flights will come down to maybe not inexpensive, but certainly something that someone could, save up their life savings to do if they wanted to do that instead of buy a car or a house or things like that. We'll have to see what the costs are. But I'm pretty sure that the tickets will come way, way down. By the time your 5-year-old is 50, I think that, should be doable. All right. We have just a couple more images here that I wanted to get to. Or a couple more points here that I wanted to get to. Let me just see here. Complicated getting all of the windows rolling. Oh, someone called me a spring chicken. Well, you're half right. There have been a couple of people recently with the space billionaire race. There is an airplane that astronauts train in. It's colloquially called the vomit comet because it's a plane that goes up and then it dives. And when you're in an elevator and it just starts and your stomach sort of pops up into your stomach for a second and then the elevator goes down. This plane can give you that feeling for about 30 seconds at a time, that that is essentially a weightless feeling. And so you can get 30 seconds of weightlessness on this dive, and it basically it flies a pattern like that, and you get 10 or 12 windows of 30 seconds each. You can go down to Las Vegas and buy yourself a ticket on a plane like that for $2,500. That's a lot less than $250,000. It's still more than I have, in my change dish on the coffee table. But those kinds of things are becoming available. And there was some talk about, maybe that's something to save up for. I think for me, the floating in space part is secondary to the seeing the Earth from space. That's the part that I think I would really want to do. And I've been able to do that vicariously through the various space programs and things like that. They've got great high def cameras up on the space station that you can watch from. But I think it would be cool to feel that sensation of weightlessness. We'll see what the new commercial space age brings. All right, we're just about out of time here. But we do have a couple of things coming up. Like I say, there's some space launches that are going to be happening. Those are all covered online. You can watch the launches and the dockings and things like that. Information of that is on our webpage, manitobamuseum.ca, and go over to the planetarium section, and that'll give you the details there. You can always talk to us through social media or drop us an email at space@manitobamuseum.ca. And let's see, what else do we have? Will we do a special on dwarf planets? Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but it might be interesting to do. There's a lot of interest in that. So thanks, Dravanek. We'll have to think about that. If you do have suggestions for future shows, drop us a line. We love to get mail. You can send us emails. You can send us, well, do people still do postcards? I don't know. You can send us a postcard at the Manitoba Museum. We would love to see you. And of course, we'll be back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock. So join us. You can always catch us. If you missed part of the episode, you can catch us on the YouTube and Facebook channels from the Manitoba Museum. So thank you all for coming. It has been great to see you. Hopefully you get a chance to get out there and enjoy the sky and let it take away some of your worries and your troubles and give you that feeling of peace and at one with the cosmos that we all crave. So thanks. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next week.